Let's talk about political consultants in Washington state, some of the challenges and problems they represent, screw-ups that they've made, and what can we do to make it better moving forward. Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. So, Washington state has political consultants and campaign managers just like every state in America. And I'm most familiar with some of the challenges and problems that we have in our state because that's where I'm politically involved. But my guess is some of the stories I'm going to tell you, some of the suggestions I'm going to tell you are going to apply to you no matter where you are. If you're considering running for office or you care about the success of new candidates in particular that want to run for office. There's been a lot of concern, especially with some of the recent results in Washington state, where the primary results certainly underwhelmed expectations, didn't even rise to the level of biased surveys, and produced results where probably good people failed to make it through the primary and others significantly underperformed, which tends to make it harder for you to raise money moving down the road in the future. One of the things about consultants, and this is something political consultants that has always bothered me, and it bothers a lot of people, is that no matter how bad the political train wreck is, those consultants seem to be walking away with a big payday no matter what. I mean, the consultant always wins. You win, you win, you lose, you win. And either way, you're getting a big cash payout, getting paid a lot of money along the way, and nobody seems to be recognizing that these consultants that seem to keep losing races just keep coming back in and fed into the same meat grinder. It's a problem because the damage that they do to the good candidates and frankly to our political system isn't great. We have, it means that really bad people get elected to office and or more frequently get elected to office. And these guys are part of that problem. They're not really part of the solution, at least the way I see it most of the time now. Now, to be fair, everybody hates consultants. It generally has a bad reputation, even in the business world, and yet it's something that we tend to think that we need, and that's been going on for a long time. Nothing new about that. Political or business consultants. There was a book that came out about 20 years ago. I remember reading it. It had an impact on me because I used to make fun of business consultants all the time. Sometimes you had really good ones that came in. It was really worth it. And then the majority of the time, you didn't get any kind of value for whatever you paid them for. And I always liked this book because it was written by a well-known consultant who had traveled around the world and had lots of stories about consultants abusing the position that they held and making sure they had big fat paydays no matter how much destruction they left behind them at the companies that were supposedly there to help. So the political world's not that much different. And when you have that political consultant come up and introduce themselves to you and say, hey, I'm the guy who's going to run your political campaign, please get me, sign me up, and I will make your life so much better, and you've got such a great future ahead of you as a political candidate. Candidates should be warned ahead of time that there's a lot of challenges that you have in sorting out and finding a really good consultant, political consultant or campaign manager, depending on how they've announced themselves to you. This is a really big challenge because once you have actually signed that contract, and it's an agreement, and usually it's some kind of a formal contract, it tends to go downhill from there. And if there's anything could help, if I could just help one candidate out there by producing this video, it's going to be well worth it because this is a very key decision that you're going to make when you bring in that consultant or that campaign manager. And if you've done the wrong one, it's very difficult to fix it moving forward because once you sign that contract, suddenly they start going into bad behavior mode like this, and they're not acting right. They're doing all the things that you never imagined that you would get when you first saw them. If they were as professional as when you first met them, you wouldn't be dealing with those scenarios. Now, the vendor kickback schemes, for example, that tends to drive me crazy as well. They're customary. And a lot of times these vendors give, especially on mailers, TV, radio ads, the vendors that actually produce those ads, produce videos, websites, digital ad buys, things like this. A lot of times there's kickbacks that you don't see as the candidate, and you certainly don't see it as the donors. And so all this money is going into these programs, and you think, oh, well, that consultant's getting paid a nominal amount. Now they're getting paid 2 or 3 times that with all the kickbacks that they're getting that are considered customary and legal in the way this little world works, and that's always a frustrating experience. The other thing that just drives me crazy is the just incompetence displayed on a frequent and daily basis when it comes to just cookie cutter mailers or ad campaigns, they look all the same, like all the other ones going out that day. And there's a part of it's because oftentimes the consultants will have a whole bunch of candidates at the same time. So they're simply making the same exact ad and they're sending it out there. That's the kind of thing that drives me crazy. That's the kind of thing that's highly ineffective, big waste of money. Remember those kickbacks, those consultants are making a lot of money off of producing a lot of crap that's really not doing anything to help that candidate win office. Now, there's a saying that everybody has, and I've used this saying before in various ways, where basically failure is the highway to success. And when people say this, though, they don't mean that they want to encourage more and more failure because that's somehow the path to more success. The frustration is at the end of the election cycle, there's a pile of money that was spent. You got your I voted sticker on a lot of people out there, but if your candidate lost and the consultant was a big part of that equation, what are you going to do about it? Because the minute that election cycle comes to an end, sometimes even before, when that candidate is discouraged and going home with their family and trying to take a vacation and forget about the disastrous 8 months they've just spent doorbelling or whatever the experience was, that consultant is right away looking for new clients, and they're not telling them just what a horrible job they just did. And that's frustrating. It drives me crazy. It drives you crazy. It drives everybody crazy involved in the process. And oftentimes, first-time candidates, they don't want to go back and experience that again. The whole thing was a nightmare for them, let alone the drama of being a political candidate. And you can take schools and classes that kind of prep you for some of this, but there's nothing like experiencing it firsthand when it's your face and your name out there on these ads and your name on the ballot, and it failed. And especially when it failed and it didn't need to, when it was really close. So here's some of my ideas for how to fix Washington's Republican political consulting class. I fully recognize that you're not going to fix it perfectly. It's not going to absolutely solve every problem, but I think some of these suggestions will at least address the higher level concerns that I have and many other people have when we've seen this up close and personal, and it's going on right now. This is current stuff. So one of the challenges that we have is when these new candidates come out, they don't know the difference between a good consultant and a bad one. To them, a political campaign manager, a political consultant, they all look the same. And so they don't really have any guidance or any way of verifying which consultant or which campaign manager they should use. There's really no way to do that. So what they do is they have to rely on the political parties for the most part. And when the party, quote unquote, recommends, or even worse, when they require that a certain political consultant be used, I think to make that a better process, that there must be former clients' experience provided directly to that prospective candidate. And when I say former client experience, it's not just like some kind of a edited version where you found the two people that consultant stumbled into and they actually won their races, and so of course they like the consultant. But try to find some of the people who lost. If the consultant dealt with them well and was professional and did a good job, you'll get that kind of a feedback from them. New clients, new people, for those new people running for office, they should have some access to that or some way of finding out what former candidates for office felt about that consultant or campaign manager that they had used. I believe that it's not that hard to influence the insiders who recommend consultants. It doesn't mean that it's officially a bribe the way I've represented there. Sometimes it could be, but it could be all kinds of you scratch your back, I'll scratch mine. All these different ways of doing it. I mean, this is the political world. There's all kinds of ways of exchanging favors and being on the inside. So you're in the cool crew, and that's who gets recommended to the new candidates for office, even if you're incompetent and totally unqualified to do the work, or at least have no demonstrated track record of achieving success. You can still be recommended as one of our consultants and be terrible. That is a problem. It's a loop that hasn't been fixed. So the other thing then related to that is that failure being the path to success is a terrible way to manage a political consultant world. It was actually meant, when the people say that, they actually mean to imply that you learn from your past mistakes, not that you basically say, listen, no matter how bad your failure, we're going to reward you for it. That's not what they meant when they say that. And yet that's exactly how the political consultants in Washington state get treated. There's spectacular disasters, squandering massive amounts of money, and the same consultants that completely botch those campaigns get put on the recommended list the next year and continue to do the same thing over and over again. Why would they change? The easy, lazy way is just to keep failing. Losing's a lot easier than winning. And as long as you get your percentage kickbacks correctly and you just keep failing and nobody's going to hold you accountable, why not? Just keep doing it. All you have to do is just stay on the good side of the people who are recommending you to these sucker candidates that come out of the woodwork every couple of years. Not an effective way of running things. Political train wrecks should not result in big paydays for consultants, and yet they do. So that is a significant problem that I think we need to address with how we do our, how we build these contracts today. Success should be part of the compensation program for political consultants and campaign managers, both on the upside and on the downside. And when I say that, I mean they sometimes will build in like winning bonuses. That's not unusual. You'll see that on a lot of the Democrat consultants as well, where if they win, they get an extra bonus. But if they lose, there should be some way of maybe not clawing back revenue, but cutting back on the amount that you pay them and holding that money in reserve. And if you lose, that money doesn't go back to them, right? It's just, there has to be both an upside and a downside. This isn't like an investment bank where they win and screw you over whether you're losing money or not. That's how consultants have set themselves up for, and I don't think that's a good idea. So I would modify those contracts and get much more standardized contracts with political consultants, whether they like it or not, that has some kind of a compensation program attached to success or failure. Now, the downside that they're going to argue about is that, listen, a lot of these candidates are long shot candidates, and I never take a long shot candidate as a client. Fair enough. But in those situations, then you can work out some kind of a different contract. But for some of these candidates who really look like they're in good position, they're getting endorsed by HROC, they're getting endorsed by the Republican Party, they have a lot of money coming into their campaigns, I think that there needs to be some accountability for the consultants, and money is going to be probably the most likely way. That's going to be the best way of holding some kind of accountability there. I think these customary kickbacks that they have in the process, they should be eliminated, preferably, or at least made very transparent ahead of time. It's really not fair to the donors who give money to political campaigns and the candidate themselves to be working so hard, raising all this money, giving all this money to them, to find out that a much higher percentage than is represented publicly is actually being kicked back into the pockets of that political consultant or campaign manager. And they all do it, and they do it right now. And it's and by the way, both parties do this. It's common and it is customary. It doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it effective or honest to have that kind of a system in place. Number one, I think it discourages quality choices when it comes to getting the best vendor that you can use for your mailer or your ad buys or your video production or your website or your digital ads. Instead, is driven more by the compensation package that the consultants already negotiate in the back end. So the client has no idea that they're getting subpar work at inflated prices just to make sure their consultant can buy a multi-million-dollar house in Eastern Washington. This is a problem. I think this whole thing should be eliminated or made very transparent, and there should be some accountability held to them. Now, one of the reasons why the consultants also don't like this, or they like the way it is now and they don't want to change it, is that the Public Disclosure Commission has the potential to get involved here at some point, because they've generally stayed out of this world and digging into what the real kickback schemes are that exist in the vendor relationship side of political campaigns. And I just think that needs to change. I think it needs to be much better and more transparent. Now, when candidates and when the whole just slipshod, sloppy work that political consultants do on their ads is ridiculous. I really think that they should have just a complete portfolio of all the stuff they've done, and that should be published somewhere and shown, so that when new candidates are coming in, they say, "Wow, they did all this great work." No, they just took a brochure they had from 4 years ago and just put your face in it. I mean, some of this stuff's just so foolishly done. Now, you're going to have some templating that ends up going on, but in the middle of one election cycle in 2022, you don't want to put out a bunch of mailers, as happened, where literally all of them, 20 of them, are basically the same mailer with just a different face, and hopefully they spell their name correctly on the disclosure statement. So that's, I think, an absurd problem. Now, let's talk about some specific fails that have occurred in the 2022 election cycle, or at least within the last 12 months of when I'm producing this video. So this stuff's going on right now. These are real problems, real challenges. I'm not so much naming names here, because frankly, from what I've seen, it's like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. One consultant does the exact same thing as the other one, and it really doesn't matter which one you've rotated through, at least of the higher profile ones. These seem to be the same behaviors repeated over and over again, and why not? Nobody gets punished. There's no downside to doing these things, and I think it's worth paying attention to these and knowing what they are. The cookie cutter mailers after the ballots have gone out without matchback votes removed. This is a classic scenario. It happened especially in Kent out in the 47th Ledge District race, but you saw this in some of the congressional races too, where the consultants just simply blew tons of money. I mean, the 47th Ledge District was almost $200,000 they blew on amongst that money that was wasted. Last minute ad buys and mailers that come out really late in the cycle, because we are mail-in balloting. Those ballots come to the voter 3 weeks before Election Day. And if you're dropping your mailers, if the consultant sent out the mailers so it lands literally on Election Day, that's a complete waste of money. That money went nowhere. It just went flushed down the drain, and the consultant got the kickback, and the crappy mailer that nobody looked at and did nothing was just a waste of money. Particularly when you have this mail-in process, what happens is the auditor's office will publish you can't tell how people voted, but you can tell who voted. And so a good consultant's going to be cleaning up their mailing list to reduce the costs of the mailer. But instead, what we saw is that most of the consultants didn't do that at all, and they didn't do any matchback comparison. They didn't take any of the names off. They just kept mailing it to people who had voted weeks before, and that money was wasted for them as well. But the sheer volume and squandering of resources that occurred in a couple of these races were ridiculous, and especially when those candidates lost. No impact on benefiting their campaign. It was just like a last-minute quick, let's flush all this money down the drain so we get our kickbacks, and the consultants still no accountability at all for that. And this is where the other problem that has come up is not just the kickbacks, say the 15% kickbacks you get from the vendors, but when you use your own family members running the vendor operations, you're kind of double dipping in a lot of ways. And that's the kind of thing that we're seeing going on more often. And I think that is also, now, by the way, it doesn't have to be a family member. It could just be a good friend that's done it. But either way, you're basically putting all your money in, and your incentive isn't to help the campaign win. Your incentive is to find all kinds of different ways to jack up the amount of money you're taking out of the candidates' fundraising efforts. And in this case, oftentimes the state party's fundraising efforts, when they're throwing money into helping Republican candidates, presumably to help them win, but they're definitely helping the consultant make a lot of money. Now, here's just a pro tip for consultants that I can't. This has been going on for a while, but this year it was just annoying. Consultants within the last few months publishing photos of their multi-million-dollar homes and their fancy vacations that they take overseas or in the South Sea or someplace on social media, smoking cigars and drinking expensive alcohol. Well, they're losing campaigns and squandering millions of dollars for the candidate. That is just tone deaf, foolish behavior that I don't understand why it happens. I mean, obviously, you always get the politics of envy and the discouragement that brings along with it. But it's just tone deaf behavior when you've got people out there volunteering to work on these campaigns to try to help that candidate get over the finish line because they care about the election, and the consultants posting stuff like this out there. It's ridiculous, and it doesn't make anybody think that money spent on that consultant is going to anything good or effective. And then, of course, when these consultants stack up their portfolio, as several of them did this election cycle with so many campaigns at the same time, that no candidate was actually getting really any kind of personalized service, nor were they getting any attention that was probably promised to them when they first signed on with the consultant, the campaign manager. And then, of course, all the ads that went out, they all look the same. They all get thrown in the garbage, and they look the same regardless of whether you were in Whatcom County or Clark County. They just all, get quickly. Of course, the key part is getting that kickback again. That's just incompetent. That's bad behavior. It's not good. It's not good policy. It doesn't result in better, successful elections. Now, the other thing, this is just another example that happened the last few months, but telling donors that you've compiled a list of signed initiatives, right? That donors paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to help, and it fails. Okay, sometimes they fail. They can't always be successful. But then refusing to provide those same donors a copy of that list after that consultant has promised to do so, and then going on months of vacation conveniently so you don't have to meet with them or talk talk to them and not returning their phone calls. That just is unprofessional, and that's the kind of thing that we're seeing going on more often than not. And it's bizarre. If you have a business background, you would not accept any of this kind of behavior, but we're seeing it go on in this weird twilight business world of political consultants. And sure, it's tough. Washington State's not a Republican state. It hasn't historically been that way, but it sure as heck is not going to get there if you have people that unprofessional who are supposedly running your political campaigns. Now, of course, this is the tried and true method that all consultants follow. It's going on right now. I guarantee, right this as I do this video, it's happening. The consultants who just had some of their campaigns blow up when they shouldn't have, right in the middle of the primary, candidates who raised a lot of money, were good candidates, should have been moving on to the general, who who failed to do so. Those consultants right now are working overtime to blame those candidates for even when the consultants' own efforts were way below par, just poor behavior, marginally managed campaigns. The consultants, this is their bread and butter, right? They got to throw somebody under the bus, and it's not going to be them. So they're going to throw the candidates, they're going to throw somebody else under the bus so that they can get that next contract next year. That's what they're doing. They're out looking for it right now. Here they are, coming to you as a future prospective candidate, hoping that you'll be the next sucker to step in line. This is a problem. I'd like to fix these things. I think we can. With some of the changes I've already recommended, I think these changes and fixes can be made. Because, of course, once people sign in with these bad consultants, this is about all they're going to get. Dead air on the end of the phone. And they're not, and of course, poor behavior and bad execution. So that's not what we need right now. Political consultants and campaign managers are needed. You need people out there to organize campaigns and candidates and get them running, and they need to be more than just somebody to fill in the blank on a PDC report saying this is my guy or this is who I'm paying, but somebody who actually knows what they're doing, is willing to do a good job, and who cares as much about getting those people elected as the candidate themselves and as the many volunteers and donors who are trying to support that candidate and get them going. It's not just about one person. It rarely is. It's not, and it isn't even just about the candidate themselves. It's about all the people who need and want that candidate to be in office so that they can block crazy and bad ideas, or so that they can do the right thing and help roll back some of the crazy stuff that the Democrats and the Socialists have done in our state. If you don't fix some of these problems, if we don't fix them and address them in a mature and effective way, then we just keep repeating some of the same mistakes. I know a lot of candidates are able to overcome bad consultants, but let's see if we can fix the consultant stuff and some of these consultant processes early on so we don't have to be dealing with that as part of the friction in the way of getting good people elected to office. And as always, as I say, please don't forget to subscribe. If you like this video, feel free to share it with others. Share it with your favorite political consultant locally. And if you are a political consultant and you think I'm entirely out to lunch and don't know what I'm talking about, I greatly invite your comments. Put them down below. I'd like to respond to those. This is all about dialogue oftentimes, and I'm sure I'm wrong about some things, but I would like to get your opinion as well. And if you're a candidate and you've experienced some of the things I explained, feel free to add your comments down below as well. And remember, no matter what, these elections matter, and if you don't care about politics, it doesn't matter because it cares about you. You're going to have to get involved to make a difference because the future belongs to those who show up.